They waited until my second bite of steak to gut me. That's how clean the ambush was. The waiter had just poured my iced tea, the kind I always ordered during celebratory lunches. No sugar, extra lemon. I thought we were here to talk about expansion, maybe even my long overdue promotion. 19 years of building systems, saving projects, and dodging corporate landmines. 19 years, and I didn't see it coming until the words dropped like stones across the linen-covered table. My name is Daniel Shaw. I'm 46 years old. I spent the last 19 years as Senior Director of Operations at Halcrest Dynamics. You probably haven't heard of us unless you work in manufacturing logistics, but in our world, we were a quiet giant, handling fulfillment pipelines for everything from aerospace components to surgical supply chains. I was there before we even had automated workflow dashboards. I built the backbone most of them don't even know they're still using. The COO, Greg Fallon, sat across from me with that vacant smile I'd always found vaguely robotic. Next to him, Julia, the HR director, clutched her leather folder like it was a flotation device on a sinking ship. I should have known the moment I saw both of them there. That wasn't a promotion lunch. That was a firing squad dressed in business casual. Dan, Greg began, his voice warm and unnaturally steady. I want to thank you for meeting us here. I know you've been with Halcrest for a long time, and your contributions have been— We're restructuring, Julia interrupted, her tone clinical. She always skipped the performance. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. There was a moment, just half a breath, where I thought it might be a joke, maybe some kind of twisted onboarding stunt for a leadership change. But then Greg nodded solemnly, and the reality dropped in. I looked at them both, then down at the still steaming plate of ribeye. Security is already aware, Julia added. They'll escort you while you clear out your office. No severance discussion, no acknowledgement of service, not even a pretense of regret. Just termination in a booth at Benson's Steakhouse under flickering Edison bulbs and a jazz trio murmuring something ironically upbeat. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. That would have given them power. Instead, I reached for my napkin, dabbed the corner of my mouth, and nodded. Understood, I said, calm as you like. They didn't know it, but I had already decided something in that moment. Not out of pride, not even spite, something quieter, something deeper. Greg gave a few rehearsed lines about transitions and how the company was exploring a leaner operating model. I didn't hear most of it. I was too focused on the way his voice shook just slightly near the end. He knew what they were doing wasn't just cold, it was calculated. I stood up slowly, thanked them both, for what, I don't know, and left without looking back. Didn't finish the steak. Didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. At the office, the guards were already posted by my glass-walled corner space. I walked past coworkers who couldn't even meet my eyes. I packed in silence. A framed photo of my daughter's graduation. A Mont Blanc pen gifted by the founder, back when the company still had a soul. My notes from a pending logistics redesign that would have saved us $3.2 million in Q3. It all fit in one box. That was the insult, really. 19 years, folded into cardboard in 20 minutes. Outside, I loaded the box into my car, shut the trunk, and slid behind the wheel. For a long moment, I just sat there. My heart wasn't racing, my hands weren't shaking, but something inside me had shifted, not cracked, clicked. I opened my phone. There were already 3 unread texts from colleagues, 2 were apologies. One was a shocked WTF just happened. None of them mattered right then. Instead, I scrolled down through my contacts and tapped a name I hadn't touched in over a year. Victor Malone. Victor used to run back-end analytics for Halcrest before he left to start his own thing. Smart guy, paranoid, which, in our world, is a survival skill. Last I'd heard, he still had access to some of the financial dashboards they never fully locked down after he transitioned out. I typed one sentence. Still have access to the internal financials? Then I hit send. They thought I would disappear quietly, fade into LinkedIn obscurity with a polite status update about new opportunities. They didn't realize something crucial. You don't bury a man who built the foundation. You just give him a reason to start digging. Victor replied within 10 minutes. All he wrote was, "Still do. Want the keys?" That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. Something had clicked in my brain, a quiet hum, steady and sharp. I wasn't mourning the job. I was mapping the skeleton of the company from memory. 19 years builds more than familiarity. It builds ownership, even if your name isn't on the glass upstairs. I knew the gears, the friction points, the people who actually made things happen, and the ones who got promoted for watching it all happen from a safe distance. They thought I was just a mid-tier manager with a fancy title. But while Greg was playing executive theater, I was the one negotiating long-term vendor terms to protect our margins. I was the name the shipping teams called when procurement got jammed, and they forgot, or never noticed, that I still held 10% equity in a shell logistics partner we spun up 5 years ago, one that was embedded in the company's core fulfillment chain. That oversight, their first mistake. The second mistake was trusting Greg with the books. I spent the weekend reconnecting, not just calls, quiet, careful visits. First stop was Elliot Kramer, an old colleague turned private consultant. He left 3 years ago after clashing with Julia in a compliance meeting. He owed me. I'd covered for him once when he missed a quarterly deadline due to his father's funeral. He never forgot that. Elliot wasn't surprised to see me. So the axe finally swung. "No," I said. They dropped it in my lap and smiled while it bled. He poured 2 whiskeys and unlocked a folder he hadn't touched in months. Vendor invoices, contract histories, rate change logs that didn't make sense when lined up against Q4 reports. I photographed everything. He didn't ask why. He just handed me a flash drive and nodded once. Next was Darcy, head of Midwest Fulfillment, still technically under Howcrest, though working remote since the pandemic. We met in a diner halfway between our homes. She slid me a napkin with 3 names scribbled on it, all suppliers, all recently reclassified from Tier 1 to Tier 3 with no documented reason. I raised an eyebrow. "They bumped them off priority," she said, right after Greg's cousin showed up. Greg's cousin. I hadn't heard that name in years. Justin Fallon, failed app developer, part-time crypto guru, full-time liability. If he was back in the picture, something was off. Back home, I fired up an old laptop, one they didn't know I'd kept. It was tied into the vendor sandbox system we built before moving to the cloud. I logged in using a dummy credential I'd created for third-party audit training, still active. Unbelievable. Inside, I started tracking transaction IDs. A pattern emerged. Payments marked consulting services were rerouting through a Delaware entity. Bright Pine Advisory. Sounded generic enough, but Bright Pine's formation records listed one contact address. A P.O. box rented by a shell company Greg's cousin had used 2 years ago for a failed drone tracking startup. They didn't restructure, they siphoned, but I wasn't ready to go public, not yet. This wasn't about revenge. This was about leverage. I reached out to Christine Wu, an attorney I'd helped during a breach of contract standoff back in 2018. She took my call after 1 ring. "They pushed you out?" she asked. "Not just me," I said. "They buried something under it." I sent her what I had, digitized logs, supplier flags, and the Bright Pine Trail. She reviewed it silently, then whistled. "If even half of this checks out, Greg's not just unethical, he's criminally exposed." I told her I didn't want to sue, not yet. I wanted positioning, something I could use, something I could hold. "Then keep gathering," she said. "Don't confront, not until you know what the board doesn't." It was Monday morning when the first domino tipped. A supplier, one I hadn't reached out to yet, emailed me directly. A man named Lucas Kemp. We'd spoken 100 times when I ran fulfillment audits. His subject line stopped me cold. Confidential, for executive eyes only. No greeting, no small talk. Just a scanned memo, time-stamped 3 weeks ago. It was a pricing adjustment notice sent to Greg's office, but with one strange attachment. An internal routing memo outlining preferred allocation directive, Q2, Project Sandbridge. Sandbridge? That wasn't in any project tracker I'd ever seen. And the recipient, not Greg, not Julia, but Justin Fallon, Greg's cousin. The memo included a clause that explicitly bypassed standard bidding procedures. It authorized advanced vendor payments for a product that didn't even exist yet, under a code name nobody had cleared. In short, they were paying Justin's company millions for vapor. I read the document twice. Then I stared at my screen in silence. This wasn't just unethical. This wasn't just shady. This was the blueprint of a cover-up, and I had it. They'd built a shell project with company money, laundered through fake deliverables, masked by layoffs and budget trims, and somehow they thought I'd just disappear. They fired me thinking I'd go quietly, that I'd vanish into the LinkedIn ether and write a heartfelt post about new beginnings. Instead, I found the ghost in their system, and now I knew exactly where to haunt them. They say revenge is sweet. I wouldn't know. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was building something, quietly, brick by brick, while they were still congratulating themselves on cutting me loose. The files Christine helped me organize were damning, no question. But I didn't want to nuke the company from orbit, not yet. There's no leverage in chaos, only in clarity. So, I didn't leak the Sandbridge documents or whistleblow to the press. I did something more dangerous. I started talking to people who still mattered. Halcrest Dynamics had a handful of clients so large, losing even one would shake the boardroom to its core. I used to manage 3 of them personally. These weren't just logos. These were relationships I nurtured with quiet consistency. Late-night crisis calls, buried missed deliveries, favors never documented. I knew who they trusted, and it wasn't Greg. It was me. I started with Pearson Tech. I reached out to their vice president of logistics under the pretense of catching up. We met in a quiet hotel lounge in Chicago. I ordered coffee. He ordered bourbon. That told me everything. "They let you go?" he said, not even trying to hide his disbelief. "Clean cut. Restructuring," I said. He leaned back, shaking his head. "Idiots." I didn't pitch him right away. I just listened. He told me how their last 3 shipments from Hallcrest had arrived late, mislabeled, or half complete. I didn't need to fake surprise. I already knew the system was fracturing. By the end of the meeting, I slid a simple 1-page NDA across the table. No promises, just a door. He signed it without hesitation. I did the same with 4 more clients in the span of 2 weeks. All off record, all in person. Some were already drafting exit strategies. Others asked what I was planning. I gave them the same answer. Something lean. Something that won't pretend trust can be automated. At night, I worked on something I hadn't touched in years, an LLC called Triarch Fulfillment Partners. I had started it with a couple of former colleagues back when we thought Halcrest might fold during the 2013 recession. We never used it, just kept the paperwork up to date, just in case. Now it was mine. I bought out the dormant shares, cleaned up the bylaws, and secured a small workspace through a friend who owned a warehouse sublet in Indiana. It wasn't much, but it was enough to build the foundation. I hired a freelance developer to build a prototype dashboard. I bought a used server rack. I negotiated net 90 terms with 2 suppliers I knew from my Halcrest days. Ones Greg never paid attention to. I wasn't stealing business. I wasn't undercutting. I was offering lifeboats while the cruise ship steered toward an iceberg. Meanwhile, Greg was too busy patching holes to notice the tide pulling out. Julia had gone dark on social media, probably laying low while compliance started sniffing around. And the board, silent. No doubt hoping it would all blow over. But not everyone was silent. One evening, as I reviewed cash flow models in my home office, my phone buzzed with a message that stopped me cold. "Meet me off-site. I think we both want the same thing." CFO. 3 months ago, this man barely acknowledged me in meetings. He was numbers, spreadsheets, and the occasional forced smile in board reviews. Now he was reaching out with no pretense. I stared at the screen for a long minute. Then I replied, "Name the place." I already knew what he wanted. You see, leverage isn't about blowing things up. It's about building something better, just far enough away that when the collapse comes, everyone runs to you by instinct. And when they do, you don't have to demand control. They'll offer it willingly. He wore a ball cap and sunglasses when we met. Not exactly subtle, but I didn't blame him. The CFO, Alan Rusk, wasn't the type to operate in shadows. He was a spreadsheet man, a numbers purist. So, if he was risking a clandestine meeting with a recently terminated employee, it meant the situation inside Halcrest was far worse than I'd assumed. We met at a commuter cafe off Interstate 94, where no one from corporate would think to look. He slid into the booth without ordering a drink and stared at the table for 10 full seconds before speaking. "They're asking me to sign off on revenue projections that include Sandbridge as a locked deal." I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. I already knew Sandbridge was smoke, the cousin, the fake invoices, the ghost deliverables. It's not real revenue, I said. I know that, he snapped, then quieter. But they want it on the next board packet. Greg's saying it's temporary positioning, optics to maintain confidence until the next round clears. Until they find another lie to patch this one, I said. He nodded, slow and exhausted. They're cornering me. I won't falsify reports, but I can't afford to just walk away. That's when I laid out my offer. I told him about Triarch Fulfillment Partners, about the clients already circling, about the infrastructure I was quietly assembling while Halcrest bled from self-inflicted wounds. I told him I didn't need revenge. I needed people with integrity. I can't match your current salary, I said plainly, but I can give you equity and freedom. Alan didn't say yes. He didn't need to. He just asked when I'd need him to start. 2 days later, his resignation email dropped. Personal reasons? No drama, no accusations, just a calm, calculated departure. The moment it hit inboxes, the tremor rolled through the system. The CFO doesn't leave a company mid-quarter without a damn good reason. And the reason was obvious to anyone paying attention. Over the next 3 weeks, 4 more mid-tier executives followed. One was the director of client strategy, someone I'd mentored 5 years ago. She messaged me privately. Whatever you're building, I want in. I welcomed her without hesitation. Clients began calling me directly, one by one. We've lost confidence in Halcrest's leadership. Your team was the only reason we stayed this long. When can we transition? They weren't even asking for price comparisons. They just wanted off the ship. I didn't gloat, I didn't post updates, I didn't even leak the truth, but someone else did. A blog post surfaced on a mid-tier industry site. Not a viral splash, just a well-sourced, heavily footnoted piece detailing financial discrepancies, unverified assets, and internal turmoil. The author? Anonymous. The sourcing? Credible. At the center of the article, Project Sandbridge. Greg issued a statement within 24 hours, calling the blog uninformed speculation, but it was too late. The fire had oxygen now. Within a week, Halcrest's second largest client pulled their contract, then a third. The board held an emergency session. I wasn't in the room, but I knew the pattern. I'd sat in on enough crisis meetings to recognize the rhythm: deflection, denial, desperation. On the 11th day, Julia resigned. No fanfare, no statement. Her LinkedIn went blank. I was in the middle of a walkthrough at our new facility when I got the alert. The lease was signed that morning, 10,000 square feet of clean modular space with built-in server infrastructure and a negotiation clause I'd bled for. Triarch had a home now, not a garage, not a dream, a real address. Alan stood beside me, holding a clipboard and smiling faintly as I watched the news scroll across my phone. HR's gone, I said. Then Greg's next, he replied. But I wasn't so sure. People like Greg don't go quietly. They cling, they rewrite, they spin. And that's why I was surprised, just a few hours later, when my phone rang with a number I hadn't saved but instantly recognized. Board chair. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. His voice was controlled but stripped of its usual pretense. Daniel, can we talk? 6 months later, my mornings start slow. Not because I'm lazy, because I finally can. No alarms blaring, no last-minute urgent requests from people too disorganized to plan ahead. I wake up to natural light in my home near the lake, grind my own coffee, and open my day with silence. Then I get to work. Triarch Fulfillment Partners is no longer a shell LLC tucked away in a backup folder. It's a real operation, lean, tight, and purposeful. We're not massive, we don't want to be. But we're profitable, respected, and growing exactly as we planned. 5 clients came over from Halcrest, quietly, deliberately. They didn't jump ship out of loyalty. They did it because they saw what Halcrest became when people like me were forced out. We operate differently here. No fluff, no useless titles. Just results, clarity, and people who own their word. Alan runs finance with a calm precision I used to only dream of. Darcy heads operations and still catches things 3 steps before they become problems. Our office is modest, glass walls, ergonomic furniture, minimal design. But everything works, and no one's afraid of Friday meetings. I never did meet with the board chair. I listened, let him talk, and politely declined his vague offer to revisit things. What he wanted was a buyout. What he needed was a clean face to tape over a bleeding brand. I wasn't interested. Greg retired early. That's how the press release phrased it. There was no farewell party, no champagne toast, just a quiet removal from the leadership page and a LinkedIn post that never quite got traction. His cousin disappeared with him, along with whatever money hadn't already been frozen by the auditors. Julia vanished even faster. Word is, she left the industry entirely. Someone said she opened a yoga studio in Arizona. I didn't verify it, didn't care. Halcrest still exists, technically, but they lost 3 major accounts, had to lay off 60 people, and are now being quietly absorbed into a logistics conglomerate that thrives on snapping up wounded brands. The part that surprises people most? I didn't burn them, I didn't leak anything, I didn't even raise my voice. I just built something better. This morning, I'm reviewing a pitch deck for a keynote panel I've been invited to lead. It's the kind of event I used to sit in the back of, wondering why the speakers all sounded like TED Talk echoes. Now, I've been asked to speak on resilient leadership in transitional markets. I won't tell them a fairy tale. I'll tell them exactly what happened, how I sat across from 2 people I once trusted, while they smiled and cut my legs out from under me, how they sent security to shadow my exit like I was a liability instead of a legacy, and how, instead of breaking, I got busy. There's a rhythm to resilience. It doesn't announce itself with drama. It hums, steady and constant, underneath everything. That hum got louder the moment I was forced out. Now it fills our office. We have a small bell mounted on the wall. Every time we finalize a contract, someone rings it. Not to gloat, just to mark the moment, to remind us that wins matter, that progress should be acknowledged, not buried under fake humility. As I finish the deck, I look around the room. 2 of our team members are huddled over a dashboard redesign. A junior analyst is presenting a fulfillment forecast on the wall display. No one's faking energy. They don't need to. They chose to be here. And me? I don't feel vindicated. I feel solid, settled, whole. I don't scroll LinkedIn for updates on people who wronged me. I don't obsess over whether Greg knows what we've become. I don't need him to know. I know. I grab my laptop, slide it into my bag, and walk out toward the conference hall down the block. The keynote crowd won't know the full story, but maybe they'll catch the most important part, how control isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, measured, and deliberate. As I reach the podium and the lights shift toward the stage, I smile. Not because they lost, but because I never had to raise my voice to win. They gave me an exit. I turned it into an entrance.